For centuries, Christians did not pray in churches. They prayed in the dark, in tunnels carved into rock beneath the city of Rome, over the bones of martyrs, with guards above their heads and death as the price of being discovered. That image belongs to school textbooks and museum displays now. It feels like ancient history, something that happened to other people in another world. And then a photograph from a parish in Wisconsin surfaces, and something shifts. Because what you are looking at is a basketball court. Hoops on the walls, hardwood floor marked with boundary lines, and in the middle of it, an altar. And around that altar, the faithful of the ancient rite celebrating their Sunday Mass. The church is a few steps away, large, beautiful, and standing. The Mass is in the gym. Before going further, fairness requires an honest acknowledgement. In this specific parish, there may be practical explanations. It is a tourist destination. Summer brings extra attendance. The gym provides space that the church building cannot always accommodate. One image, one parish, one set of local circumstances does not by itself constitute evidence of a systematic pattern. That caveat is real, and it deserves to be stated. But the image struck people the way it did not because of what it proved about that one parish. It struck people because of what it symbolized about a direction that is now years in the making, and documented not by impressions, but by numbers and decisions that are a matter of public record. In 2007, Pope Benedict XVI issued Summorum Pontificum. The document made the traditional Latin Mass freely available to any priest who wished to celebrate it, without requiring permission from a local bishop. Benedict's reasoning was theological and historical. The ancient rite had never been abrogated. It had never been formally suppressed. It remained a legitimate expression of the Roman rite, and any priest of the Latin Church had the right to celebrate it. The effect was significant. Communities that had maintained the ancient rite through difficult decades gained stability. New communities formed. Seminarians discovered a liturgical tradition that many of them had never encountered. The numbers grew. 14 years later, in July 2021, Pope Francis issued Traditionis Custodes. The document reversed the framework Benedict had established. The traditional Latin Mass was no longer freely available. Bishops were required to designate specific locations for its celebration. Priests who had been ordained after 2007 under the Summorum Pontificum provisions needed explicit episcopal authorization to continue. The document described the traditional Mass not as a treasure of the Latin Church, but as a potential source of division, and it required bishops to ensure that communities attached to it were not opposed to the validity of the Second Vatican Council and the magisterium of the popes. The practical consequences have been accumulating ever since. In the Diocese of Arlington, Virginia, authorized locations for the traditional Latin Mass decreased from 21 to 8. In Owensboro, Kentucky, a bishop ordered the complete cessation of Mass in the ancient rite beginning at the end of June 2026. In Italy, a traditional priest was denied the use of the Padre Pio shrine for Mass and celebrated instead in the basement of a hotel. A basement in Pietrelcina. A gym in Wisconsin. A dwindling list of authorized locations in diocese after diocese across the United States and Europe. Each of these episodes, taken alone, can be explained. A local bishop making a pastoral judgment, a scheduling conflict at a shrine, a parish managing summer attendance. Taken together, they do not explain themselves away. They form a line pointing in a single direction. The oldest Mass in the Catholic world is being progressively relocated from the center of Catholic life to its margins, from churches to gymnasiums, from shrines to hotel basements, from 21 locations to 8, and in some places from any location to none at all. And it is here that history stops being background and becomes something uncomfortably immediate. Because this is not the first time the Catholic Mass has been pushed into the humblest available spaces. It is not even the second or the third. For nearly 3 centuries, Christians celebrated the Eucharist in the catacombs. The word itself names the place. Underground galleries carved from rock, narrow and damp, extending for miles beneath the surface of a city that was slowly feeding Christians to its entertainments. The Mass was celebrated over the tombs of those who had already died for it, by priests who knew they might be the next to die for it, in front of faithful who came in secret because attendance itself was a capital risk. There were no stained glass windows, there were no organ pipes, there were no pews. There were tunnels and torches and the body and blood of Christ. And then England in the 16th and 17th centuries. After the break with Rome, being Catholic in England was not a matter of theological preference or liturgical taste. It was a legal status that could end in execution. Priests trained on the continent were smuggled back into England, hidden in the holds of ships. They celebrated Mass in attics, in barns, in the secret spaces behind hidden panels that historians would later call priest holes. When the guards came, the priest disappeared into the wall. The chalice and paten went with him. Edmund Campion, a Jesuit priest of extraordinary gifts, was captured, tortured, and executed at Tyburn in 1581 for the crime of being a Catholic priest in England. He celebrated Mass in hiding until the moment of his arrest. Margaret Clitheroe was a mother in York. She hid priests in her home. She arranged for Mass to be celebrated there. When she was arrested, she refused to plead, to protect her children from being forced to testify against her. The sentence for refusing to plead in Tudor England was pressing. She was laid on the ground with a sharp stone beneath her back, and weights placed on top of her until she died. She was 30 years old. She died so that Mass could be celebrated somewhere in York. In those attics and barns and catacombs, exactly what happens on every altar happened. The words of consecration were spoken. The bread became the body of Christ. The wine became his blood. The Mass was not less holy because it was said in a damp tunnel or a hidden room. It was not less real because no bishop had designated the barn as an authorized location. The presence was the same. The sacrifice was the same. The grace was the same. This is the truth that the image of a gym with an altar at the center forces into the open. It is not the size or beauty of the place that gives value to the Mass. It is the Mass that gives value to the place. A gymnasium with the Eucharist, celebrated on a folding table surrounded by basketball hoops, is, at that moment, the most important location within 100 miles of wherever it stands. A basilica without the Eucharist is stone and glass and acoustics. The Christians of the catacombs were not pushed underground by accident. They were pushed underground because they possessed something that the world around them could not tolerate. A truth that did not move. A God who did not negotiate his terms. An act of worship that asserted, quietly and without compromise, that Caesar was not Lord. The empire could fill the Colosseum with spectators, and the Colosseum floor with Christians, and the Christians kept coming back, because what they had could not be taken from them by the removal of a building. The situation today does not have Nero at its head or guards at the doors. No priest celebrating the traditional Latin Mass in a Wisconsin gymnasium faces arrest. No family attending that Mass risks being reported to the authorities. The comparison has limits, and those limits should be respected. But the direction of the pressure is worth naming honestly. The push to relocate, restrict, and in some dioceses eliminate the ancient rite is not coming from outside the Church. It is coming from within it, from documents signed in Rome, from decisions made by bishops in dioceses across the United States and Europe, from a deliberate institutional policy that has been in effect since 2021 and has been applied with increasing consistency in the 5 years since. And against that background, the pattern that emerges across Wisconsin and Owensboro and Pietrelcina is not a series of unrelated local decisions. It is the visible edge of a policy whose logic, followed to its conclusion, points toward a church in which the Mass that sanctified Padre Pio, the curé of Ars, John Fisher, Thomas More, Edmund Campion, and Margaret Clitheroe is either formally suppressed or reduced to a tolerated anomaly practiced by small groups in increasingly inconvenient locations. A basement in a hotel, a gymnasium with basketball hoops. Different places, one direction. The question history puts to us at this moment is not whether these places are worthy of the Mass. History has already answered that. Catacombs were worthy. Attics were worthy. Barns were worthy. The question is what the people who make these decisions believe they are accomplishing, and what the people who attend Mass in gymnasiums understand about who they are and where they stand in a story that is 20 centuries old and nowhere near its end. There is a question that traditionalist Catholics have been asking for months, and it deserves to be put plainly because the answer, or rather the absence of any coherent official answer, is itself revealing. Why does the ancient Mass provoke such persistent institutional hostility? Not indifference, not benign neglect. Active, documented, progressive restriction that has over 5 years moved from limiting availability to eliminating it entirely in some dioceses. What is it about a silent liturgy in Latin, directed toward God, celebrated according to a form that shaped the spiritual lives of every canonized saint of the Western Church for over a millennium, that generates this particular kind of institutional energy? The question is not rhetorical. It points towards something real. The traditional Latin Mass is not simply an older version of the same thing. It embodies a specific theology of worship that stands in sharp contrast to the vision of the Church that has dominated institutional Catholic culture since the 1970s. The ancient rite is vertical. Its orientation is toward God. The priest faces the same direction as the faithful, toward the altar, toward the east, toward the transcendent. The silence is not emptiness. It is the weight of mystery being held rather than explained. The Latin is not exclusion. It is the voice of a church that exists across time, and not only across geography. A language that connects the Mass celebrated in Wisconsin today with the Mass celebrated in Rome in the 5th century and in England in hiding in the 16th. Against that, consider what has flourished without restriction in the same years that the traditional Mass has been pushed into gymnasiums and hotel basements. Unmarried couples have received blessings in parishes across multiple continents under provisions that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Liturgical celebrations have included elements that the tradition would have found disorienting at best. The boundaries between Catholic worship and a kind of therapeutic communal affirmation have become, in many parishes, genuinely difficult to locate. None of this has generated formal Vatican decrees. None of it has produced bishops ordering cessations. None of it has resulted in priests being denied access to shrines. The Mass that formed the Curé of Ars is suitable for a hotel basement. What many would call accommodation to the spirit of the age fills the most beautiful churches in Europe and receives institutional approval. The contrast is not imagined. It is documented, and it is visible to anyone who looks at it without the protection of ideological commitment in either direction. And then there is the demographic fact that no one who wishes to argue for the suppression of the ancient rite can comfortably explain. Where the traditional Latin Mass is celebrated, young people attend, not the aging congregations that characterize many updated parishes in Western Europe and North America. Young men and women in their 20s and 30s, large families with children who sit still through a long, silent liturgy because something in it speaks to them that nothing else has. Seminarians who discovered the ancient rite and found in it a reason to give their lives to the priesthood. Converts who came to the church through the traditional Mass because what they encountered in it was unlike anything the surrounding culture offered and unlike anything they had found anywhere else. The vocations follow the same pattern. Communities attached to the traditional rite are producing priests. The Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King, the communities formed around the ancient rite are not struggling for seminarians. They are building seminaries. Meanwhile, dioceses that embraced the full post-conciliar program with enthusiasm are closing parishes, merging schools, and importing priests from Africa and Asia to staff what remains. This is not an argument that the traditional Mass is the only valid form of Catholic worship, or that every innovation since the Council has been a failure. It is a much simpler observation. The evidence from 50 years of lived Catholic experience does not support the conclusion that the ancient rite is a source of division and decline that requires aggressive restriction. The evidence points in the opposite direction, and yet the restrictions continue and in some places intensify. The faithful who find themselves in that gymnasium in Wisconsin are not, in the main, angry people nursing grievances. They are people who discovered in the traditional Mass something that changed their lives, that oriented their prayer, that connected them to a tradition extending back through the martyrs to the apostles. They are parents who bring their children to that Mass because they believe it will form them in the faith more deeply than the alternatives available to them. They are young people who chose to drive an hour each way on a Sunday morning rather than attend something that left them feeling that whatever they were looking for, they had not found it there. Those people deserve a serious account of why the church that claims to value their participation is systematically reducing the number of places where they can practice their faith in the form that has given it meaning. They have not received that account. What they have received is Traditionis Custodes and its implementing instructions and the progressive application of both across diocese after diocese. What they have not received is an honest engagement with the question of why the Mass that produced the saints is being treated as an institutional problem requiring management and containment. History is patient. It has seen this kind of pressure before, and it knows what it produces. The catacombs did not diminish the church. They produced martyrs who became the seed of a civilization. The priest holes of Tudor England did not extinguish English Catholicism. They produced Edmund Campion and Margaret Clitheroe, and a tradition of quiet fidelity that endured through centuries of legal persecution and emerged intact. The barn masses and attic liturgies and hotel basement celebrations did not reduce the Mass to something smaller or less holy. They demonstrated that the Mass does not depend on institutional permission for its validity or its power. What those who celebrate in gymnasiums today are living, without necessarily framing it in these terms, is a version of something very old. Not a persecution in the legal sense, not a situation of martyrdom or mortal danger, but a pressure applied from within rather than from outside that pushes the ancient rite toward the margins and tests the commitment of those who love it. And the test is revealing something that the institutional logic of restriction did not anticipate. The communities are not dispersing. The attendance is not declining. The young families are not drifting toward the updated alternatives available to them a few minutes closer to home. They are driving to the gym. There is a logic in that stubbornness that the history of the Mass makes legible. A truth cannot be erased by relocating it. It can be hidden, but hiding makes it more vivid, not less. The Christians who filed into the catacombs knew that what they were doing was worth the risk, not because they had calculated the institutional odds, but because what they encountered on the altar in those dark tunnels was not replaceable by anything the world above offered. The priest in the barn in Elizabethan England was not celebrating a lesser Mass because he was in a barn. He was celebrating the same Mass that was being celebrated in the great cathedrals of Catholic Europe, and in that barn it may have burned with a particular intensity precisely because it was costing something. The faithful in Wisconsin are not the heirs of a losing cause. They are the heirs of every Catholic who ever refused to let the Mass be taken from them. They can be given a gymnasium instead of a church. They can be told that their liturgy is a source of division and that their attachment to it is suspect. They can be reduced from 21 authorized locations to 8, and from 8 perhaps to fewer still. None of that touches what descends on the altar when the words of consecration are spoken. None of that changes what the Mass is or what it does. Wherever it is offered, in a basilica or a basement, in a cathedral or a room with basketball hoops on the walls, the same God descends, the same sacrifice is made present, the same grace is poured out. Empires have tried to stop it, governments have tried to suppress it. The Church herself, in this strange season, seems to be trying to contain it. It has not worked before. There is no particular reason to believe it will work now. The spring they have tried to cover 1,000 times continues to flow. What do you think? Leave a comment below. Amen. God bless you.